So good morning, nuts and bolts. Listener, here we are yet on another Friday, live streaming from the Lone Hill studio. For those who are not able to watch today, please remember you can always replay it, review it on Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Today we have a very special guest and a dear friend of mine, Bridget Westwood, who is a clinical psychologist and works with individuals, families, adults, and teenagers in her practice, which she's had for 14 years. And how Bridget and I met is another story, but for another day. But really, what I enjoyed about Bridget and still do is her absolute dedication to take away the stigma of mental health in people's lives and also to help people find coping mechanisms. And I'm sure many of you can resonate with that through the pandemic, mental health has increased or disease has increased dramatically. I'm sure we haven't even seen all of it yet. We're still starting to see many things. So I'm sure Bridget's diary is bursting at the seams with demand coming in. And the topic we have today is insecure overachievers or overachievers. So that is a topic that's very, very relevant, specifically in organizations, regardless what size of the organization, and also for individuals. And Bridget will just share with us for a moment, what does that mean to be an overachiever? What are the impacts? And just to see how that plays out, because I mean, to be an overachiever is fantastic. We all love them. They're high performers. I mean, they really make a big contribution to the bottom line, but at what cost? And to whom is that cost? So I'll hand over to Bridget for a moment and we'll do a Q&A session. So as things pop up, I'll ask Bridget. And dear listeners, if you have any specific questions that you want answered, please just type them into the chat box and then I'll ask Bridget what they are. So, Bridget, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Kerstin. Thank you so much for chatting to me this morning. This is something that I have noticed that's been quite prevalent in my practice and definitely increased since it's been there, but since lockdown and since when a lot of people were working remotely. And seeing quite of my clients having this sort of, say, insecure overachievers. And what that is that where I see them sort of or where the issue comes in, because overachieving is great. It's wonderful. They push, they continue, they go, you can give them, they will not say no. But at the bottom of their drive is a fear of losing out, so sort of in competition. So where everyone wears it in corporate, and as well as when there's at the bottom is the fear of failure and a lack of feeling worthy. So rather than just it being for achievement based, what's actually been driving them is actually quite a negative component to their sense of self. And where I see is so they will, the sort of like the key signs to look out for is when their work-life balance goes completely off. There's a need for approval. So the need for approval for colleagues, there's a need for approval from managers, from people higher up in the hierarchy, and also just in their own work ethic. So they can even put everything else aside, and their work ethic becomes the key goal to be seen through that. So what happens, like people will then put aside even just basic needs of health, where relationships fail. I mean, health to a point where people won't even go to the bathroom for fear of losing out or fear of not being in that pool. And when it came to a lot of people working online, I saw that there was absolutely, these overachievers went even over above more because there was nothing to stop. So it was meeting upon meeting. They would work flat out for 16 hours, barely eat, come to me with then a lot of this, obviously, anxiety, sleeping problems, relationship problems, mental health issues as well. and leading potentially to burnout, because there's also a lack of trust within the corporate space as well that I find that they're having as well, because you're having a group of a whole lot of insecure overachievers, and they all sort of like fighting for their place within the corporate, within promotions. And I've found that sometimes corporates actually use this because they have great work ethic, but then it does end up at a massive cost. And that's where it is coming to look at, okay, but how do we bring in some balance to find some internal locus, so where we're trying to find that, where do we find that internal level of satisfaction for success versus going on this push, which becomes a donkey chasing, being dangled with the carrot in front. And you really always define the carrot either.
So if they don't even find time to go to the bathroom, I'm not quite sure how they find time to even come and see you. Or they must be at that stage so desperate. And I know when I spoke to you a few weeks ago, you were saying they would come for a session, but be on a meeting at the same time. So even there, it's not even honoring yourself. It's trying to split yourself in two and doing that. So that was just fascinating.
I've had clients who have also missed best friends' weddings, who have, where the whole essence of priorities actually becomes quite it's unbalanced and it's unhealthy to that point where you're putting so much into one area, which we need, will love, we can get totally in that. There's a space of the flow. That's something separate. I'm not talking about the flow.
Yes. And when do they realize that their overachieving becomes a hindrance? Is it only when they reach burnout, or do they start noticing it before? Because there's warning signs. There's physical warning signs, there's relationship warning signs. But when do they actually go, Bridget, I need help?
Yes, it is unfortunately usually at the end of a crisis point. So either a relationship, they've been dragged in here by partners, are saying that there's something has to give because we don't, children never see them, or spouses or relationships are falling apart. So either that point, or physical health. I see a lot with physical health. So there can be generally a lot of digestive issues, high anxiety, and so then going into the mental space, insomnia. So unfortunately, it is where it's a little bit far, and then I'd have to sort of work back. And to change the work ethic is really, really hard, because actually where it is of working, we start working, going right back to the basis, because insecure overachievers are not born, they're made. But it can also relatively starting from childhood. We get very much this type A personality pushing, and so having to do a lot more depth work at that point in time to change certain belief systems and to help them realize that they can actually put their own needs first as well. We don't have to, there doesn't actually have to be a choice. So it requires quite a shift within that mental space.
And I guess the work environment or organizations, that environment is difficult because it fuels that creation of being an overachiever, because let's be honest, organizations benefit from it. And do leaders ever step in and say, Bridget, I think you've really hit the limit now, you need to go? Or is it always for the individual to decide?
It's actually always for the individual. There has been one case where an individual actually came to see me because her boss or manager actually had to resign due to burnout, and she then took notice that, okay, wait, if he's in that space, where am I? Because I'm heading there soon, and I'm only in my late 20s. So that's the other notice, that I'm seeing it mainly around the ages of early 20s and late 20s, early 30s.
So we create this ourselves, like you say. Our environment contributes a large component to it. We want to feel acknowledged. There's a level of FOMO of not, And Bridget has just disappeared. So I'll just wait for her to come back on, dear listeners. So that's a first. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, my
Uh,
apologies.
I was like, right, I have to finish this conversation. But what I was saying, so there's a fear of FOMO. There's a need to be acknowledged. There is just that fear of failing, and
Avoidance.
also that and then being scared of saying no, that I'm maybe not good enough, or it's not acceptable to say no, of like setting those boundaries. So is there the insecure overachievers? Do you see that more prominent in males or females, or is it quite equal?
It's actually very equal. The
Very
manifest
equal.
is how it manifests can be quite different. So that's how I see it, but I do see it as relatively equal.
Okay. And what coping tools would you start off with? What would be something where you would start to help an overachiever? Is it to acknowledge it? That I'm actually this? Is that the first step?
Absolutely. And the first step would also be to balance their nervous system, because at that point, the nervous system is quite dysregulated, because there'll be a lot of anxiety and in this constant, and in a survival state, fight, flight, and freeze. Competition zones, you're working hard. It is. So it will be the first thing is to help balance the nervous system and the neurochemistry. So I would teach techniques that they can do daily before even doing any depth work, so it's acknowledging, okay, wait, this is how I'm feeling. Something's not right. My health is not right. Mental health, physical health, relationships. I start actually with the physical body as well, because it does have that physical manifestation. So based meditation or relaxation techniques, or any certain things that they can then put in place and look at their routine. And I say to them, it's like, don't think about it. You add that in, you put that in, because otherwise, if we look down further line, there's going to be a lot more physical implications.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do more the depth work and look at the worthiness, because at the bottom, so yes, there's this, they're fueled by an avoidance of failure. And underneath that is that feeling of not good enough, not feeling worthy, and not having the ability to express their needs or say, I need some space and time in this. I'm not coping.
So while this is happening, they're learning all these amazing tools. They still have to go back to this environment, which is not complementary to them, really. And I'm curious, what's the level of the success rate? So, because the individual has to own it and drive the process and do the exercises. And we all know what you put in is what you get out. So generally, do they manage to pull through, or do they start it and then abort it?
Most of most stay. It depends on the circumstances, but I think, as I say, when they finally come to see me, it's reached a point where they actually know that they don't have any other option. So they're more long-term and work, or even if they just come in, maybe check in once a month with tools and techniques and just guidance, a lot of online sessions as well. My sort of, and this is where I do work on Saturdays, and I do work quite so late at nights for these clients, because I know that otherwise it's going to be really, really tough to see.
For them to put it in. So I'm sure the families, the partners, and the kids thank you that you are able to do that. And out of curiosity, what creates this fear of failure and fear of being this overachiever or saying no? How have we been socially conditioned to this?
I think there's many factors that involve. It could be we're going back into childhood as well. So I mean, yes, society, in society we also promote that at schools very much. So that you're getting recognized, and the parental influence. But again, that depends on, context by context in different cases. But I have noticed that there has been a parental influence where perhaps someone going to get seen for achieving at school, and if one doesn't get this, so recognition in those aspects, whether it's through sport or academics. But that's just one side. But we definitely are looking a little bit further back and seeing how society that you have to fit and tick certain boxes to be worthy. And it's
I
what
think
is
that, sorry, yes.
Sorry.
And I think as a parent, that's challenging, because you do want the best out of your child. You want to encourage them to achieve high marks. You want them to perhaps be a better achiever at sports, because you want to support them, knowing that it opens up many options later in the future. So it comes with very often with a good intent, or it's not coming to that without realizing what impact it has. So it's curious how, it's just, sorry, not curious, but it's sometimes sitting back and thinking, am I doing the right thing for that child? And you're right, our education system is always a big challenge. It has is not very supportive in that, and that could most probably use a good overhaul. So we do come into organizations already with some baggage.
Absolutely, where it is linked. I think it's that link with self-worth.
And do you find certain industries foster more overachievers than others?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, we don't need to mention them, but there's certain industries where it's just absolutely expected, and it's a non-negotiable.
It's actually, I think that is what they look for.
And then do individuals, from your experience, when they do have severe burnout and they are then booked off for 2 or 3 months to recover, I mean, that doesn't go down well with organizations, because that brings in a big stigma, like, what's wrong with you, that you've actually reached that point, and how do you get, I guess, reintegrated into that environment?
That's the tough part, because what a lot happens is that then the individual decides, I don't want this, and then goes on to another complete extreme venture, which is also not ideal either, because so maybe it's needed at that time, but it's not the ideal situation to have to end up doing that. To the industry.
Yeah, this whole concept of being busy and the world has to go faster and we have to achieve more is I can't even say it's a trend, because it's not even a trend. It's just there, and I guess one can so quickly be swept into that wave, and there's a high level of consciousness or awareness needed to sometimes sit back and think, does this suit me, and am I going to go along in the stream, or am I going to consciously step out and do my own thing? So that's interesting. Yeah.
And the other thing, which we haven't really touched on, but it also it influences creativity as well, and productivity hugely, because when you're in such a survival state and you're just working completely, putting out fires and putting demand, and so very sort of robotic, then you aren't actually accessing the creative areas of your brain. And to produce, it becomes quite monotonous.
Which then hinders what I'm so passionate about, is where you really can flourish, because here you can't flourish, because you can't even like you say, your nervous system doesn't allow you to, and you're not in a productive state. Your mental health doesn't allow you to. You actually just functioning, but in your mind, you've tricked yourself to think, I'm an overachiever.
Yeah, and it is, as you say, it's just functioning, actually.
And it's quite contrary to what you want to believe you are doing.
Absolutely.
So a very interesting topic. So how, just as we wrap up, what would be 2 or 3, what's the word, indicators, or perhaps indicators for leaders to see, to observe, to say, I've got an overachiever here, and I can see this is going to go towards burnout and maybe I need to support?
Yeah, I think, well, by that stage, definitely the ones would be the physical signs. So if you're starting to see that clients are there, so their staff, they are starting to arrive late and they have before, then you know that they're starting to arrive late, or if they're looking tired, if they ask, because their work won't be totally up to scratch, because everything is, if they're always taking on demands, it's the one that's always working late. Yes, absolutely fine. But if there is, if you start looking at the physical manifestations, they will come through, and they will see.
So it's the physical manifestation. They're always coming late. I guess they'll always maybe even start missing deadlines because
And
there's just
maybe being ill. So they'll start having increase with a few ill days. And it's not so that, but they don't start in that way. So you can start seeing that there's a decline.
Mm-hmm. So it's really keeping your eye on there's a change here, and then really encouraging leaders to start having conversations to say, what's happening? How can I support you? And I guess that's how we can start to bring in some conversation around this.
And to be aware of time as well, that there does need to be balance, that one cannot, 16-hour days, 12-hour constantly. That it's just, it's not physically feasible mentally either.
20 is better, isn't it? All right, Bridget, time's up. So thank you very much for being with us today on this exceptionally interesting topic. And I'm sure we could have spoken a lot more. But leaders and business owners, really, I'd like to invite you to start looking at your team a little bit closer to observe what's happening with them, who's missing deadlines, who's showing this fatigue, who's coming up late. So really assess them and then have the courage to start having conversations. After this live stream has ended, I will put Bridget's email address in the chat box, and then you're welcome to reach out to her for either further questions or consultations. And I'm sure she's more than equipped, I know that, to assist you. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Bridget, for being here today. And I wish everybody a phenomenal Friday, and just take good care. Thank you and goodbye.
Like Kerstin.
Bye.